Hi, fourth grade friends. In today's reading lesson, we are going to review how to write a really great summary. This lesson is going to be broken apart into two sections. The first part, we are going to review how to gather important information from a text. And the second part, we will take that really important information and use it to write a really great summary. Now, in order to be successful for today's lesson, you're going to need a couple of things. The first thing you're going to need is some paper, and the second thing you're going to need is something to write with. I also want to make sure that you can access the pause and the play button on your device. There are going to be times throughout the lesson where I ask you to pause the video so that you can give yourself enough time to respond to questions that I may ask. And when you have given yourself enough time to do so, you can resume the video by hitting play. So let's practice. When I say go, I want you to hit the pause button. While the video is paused, I want you to search for those materials that you need in order to be successful, your paper and your pencil. When you have found those materials and you have returned to your device, then I want you to hit resume. Resume the video by hitting the play button. Okay, go. Okay, welcome back. Like I had said, we are going to review how to write a really great summary. Today is part 1. I am going to read a tale of confusion to you, and then we will go back and take a look at that same fictional story and search for important details so that we can write a really great summary. Now, when we summarize a fictional text, we are briefly retelling the story, those really important story details, in our own words, all right? Now, a good summary only includes important details from the text. Those important details may include main characters, a description of the setting or where and when a story takes place, and it'll also include elements of the plot, like events, or the problem that the characters are facing, or the solution, how those characters solve the problem. All right, so now let's take a look at our fictional text. The text that we will read today is called A Jacket in the Boot. When we visited my parents' friends in England, their son James and I became fast friends. One afternoon, he and I decided to go to the park. It was cool outside, so James was looking for his jacket. Then he said, "Oh, I think I left it in the boot." I looked at him puzzled. Why would he leave his jacket in a boot? James started laughing. Then he told me that in England, the trunk of a car is a boot. We had taken a drive in the countryside earlier. Because it had been warmer then, he had left his jacket in the trunk instead of wearing it. Now, before we dive deep into this story and search for important story details, I need you to do something for me. When I say go, I want you to pause the video. Using that same paper and pencil that you searched for earlier, I want you to organize your paper in the way that you see it here on the whiteboard. And I also want you to include the same important headings that you can see here. We have characters, we have setting, problem, events, and solution. Again, pause this video so you have enough time to get your paper organized and ready for our next step. Go. Okay, welcome back. I hope you've given yourself enough time so that your paper is organized in this way. This is where we are going to organize the important story details from A Jacket in the Boot. I would like to start with characters and setting. Now, I want you to think for a moment. Think about the story that you just heard me read. Can you remember the names of any characters from our story? Or can you give a short description maybe of one of the characters from our story? And then I also want you to be thinking about where and when this story was taking place. All right, now what I want you to do is, when I say go, pause that video so that you can actually record with your pencil on your paper the names or short descriptions of the characters that we have in A Jacket in the Boot, and also where and when the story was taking place. Be ready, because in a short while, I will share answers with you. Go. All right, now hopefully you've given yourself enough time to be thinking about who those characters are and where and when our story is taking place. Now, I just want you to be aware that our answers may not look or sound the same, okay? And that's all right. We might have used different words to describe the characters or the setting, or as we get down here farther, later on in our lesson, we might have used different sentences. That's okay, all right? Just make sure that yours closely match what I'm sharing with you today. If you were unable to identify any characters or the setting, or like I said, any of these other elements as we move forward in our lesson, if you are unable to identify any of them, it's going to be really important that you record them onto your paper, because all of the information that we're gathering in our graphic organizer is going to be used in part 2 of the lesson when we write our summary. Okay, now I'm thinking back to our story, A Jacket in the Boot, and I am looking to see if I can figure out who the characters are. And I know that this story was being told by an American boy. We never learned the American boy's name, okay? So I just identified him as our narrator. He is the one character who is telling us the story. I was also thinking about the character that our narrator was playing with. And I remember that his name was James. Okay, and I did give a short description of James, and I just identified him as the English boy, or the boy from England. So our two main characters in A Jacket in the Boot are James, the boy from England, and our narrator, who is the boy from America, or the American boy. Our next job was to think about the setting, or where and when the story was taking place. I remember reading that our narrator was on a trip in England. He was visiting some of his parents' friends. So I know that this story is taking place in England. Okay, that's sort of the where the story is taking place. But the part about when was a little bit trickier for me, so I actually had to go back and reread the text. And as I was rereading the text, I identified 2 sentences that can help me identify when. It says, one afternoon, he and I decided to go to the park. It was cool outside, so James was looking for his jacket. What those 2 sentences tell me is that this was taking place in the afternoon, and it was also a very cool day, which explains why James needed his jacket. So I'm also going to add cool afternoon to my setting. Cool afternoon. So let's just recap a little bit. Our main characters are the American boy, and he is our narrator. And we also have an English boy, and his name is James. When I looked closely at the setting, the details about the setting, I found that this is taking place in England. And then I also identified that this was taking place on a cool afternoon. Again, you might not have used the same words as I did. You might have described it a little bit differently. But these are the really important details that we want to make sure that we do have recorded on our paper, because we will need them for tomorrow's lesson when we write our summary. All right, now we need to be thinking about the problem. I did tell you in the beginning that this was a tale of confusion. Okay, so I was thinking about, okay, well, what about this story was confusing, or was one of the characters puzzled? And I do remember reading that our narrator said he felt pretty puzzled. That was after James used a word that our narrator was unsure of. It left him feeling a bit confused. Alright, so the description that I have up here is that James uses a word that confuses our narrator. That's the problem that we really need to solve here in this fictional story. Alright, so now let's move on to the events. Something I want to make sure to mention is that it's really important when listing these events that you list them in the order that they happened in the text. Okay, so I want you to, when I say go, pause this video so that you have enough time to really think about the story that I read and identify 4 important events that took place from the beginning, the middle, and the end. You may need to rewind the video back to the story so that you can listen to it one more time. Okay? Go. Okay, welcome back. Our job now is to identify some of the very important events that have taken place in A Jacket in the Boot. And when I'm thinking back to the beginning of our story, I think it's extremely important to note that we have a boy from America who has traveled to England to visit friends. I think that that's very important. So that is the first event that I am going to list underneath events on our graphic organizer, is that our narrator is visiting England, and that he has also become friends with our other character, James. Okay, now this sentence alone identifies our main characters, the narrator and James, and it also lets us know that this story is taking place in England. That's part of the reason why I feel like this is a really important thing to note under events. Now I'm thinking about what happened next. What did those 2 boys want to do? Well, I do remember that they wanted to go to the park. They wanted to play. So that is my second event that I am going to list, that the boys wanted to go to the park. All right, we're sort of to the middle of our story here, getting close to the end. Now, after they decided to go to the park, this is the part that sort of identifies our problem. Because this is when James says, I need my jacket. Because I remember it's a cool afternoon, so he wanted his jacket. Well, this is when James says, oh, shoot, I think I left my jacket in the boot, which left our narrator very confused. So this event is important to list because this one lets us know why our narrator is feeling very puzzled or confused. He described, or he thinks that his jacket is left in the boot. All right. And the last and final event that I would like to list is because James had said, I left my jacket in the boot, the narrator is now feeling very confused. All right. So my last and final event, I'm going to slide that right up over here so I have enough space, is that our narrator is feeling very confused. All right. Now again, we might not have used the same words to describe these events, okay? But it is very important that you do have these written on your graphic organizer so that we can use them in part 2 of the lesson when we write a summary for A Jacket in the Boot. And again, if you need to hit pause at any moment, please do so that you can be as successful as possible. The last and final part of our graphic organizer is to identify the solution. How did we solve this problem? How did our narrator sort of become not so confused anymore? You need to think back to the story to do that. And what I want you to do is, when I say go, I want you to hit pause, and I want you to think, what happened in the story that helped our narrator understand really what James was saying when he said that he needs to look for his jacket in the boot. And I want you to record it underneath solution. Go. Now, if I'm thinking back to the story that I read, I remember at the very end, James giggled a little bit because he realized, oh my goodness, I said something that he is just not understanding. And so what James had to do is that he had to explain to our narrator that the boot is actually the trunk of a car. In England, they call the trunk of a car a boot. So let's just go over everything that we've gotten so far to make sure that what you have on your paper is similar to what I have up here. The characters in our story are an American boy, and he is our narrator. He is the character telling the story. We also have an English boy, or a boy from England, and his name is James. The story takes place in England on a cool afternoon. The problem in A Jacket in the Boot is that James uses a word or phrase that really confuses our narrator. 4 important events from the beginning, middle, and end are that our narrator has visited England and he becomes James's friend. The boys decide that they want to go to the park. It is a cool afternoon, so James decides that he needs his jacket, and he says that he left it in the boot, which leaves our narrator very confused. The solution to our problem is that James has to explain that the boot is actually just the trunk of a car. All right, 4th grade friends, that is the end of part 1. Part 2, we will take all the information that we have gathered here and write a summary. Please keep track of your graphic organizer so that you can use it so that you can be successful in writing your summary.